Okay, well, I wanted to tell you about my office building. You know, it was kind of a interesting circumstance of how that all occurred. Back in when I started the insurance business, I had an office downtown at and on River Street, but or on Main Street to start with, and then I went to River Street into the Power and Light building and had the upstairs. And then when uh, Don Chapin went into business with me, we had several rooms in a kind of a suite, and the price that we had to pay there was getting to the point where I figured I could almost cover a building with what we were paying there in rent. Because so I started kind of looking around at things that were available, and we found a house behind, was over near Fairview Mall, and so I talked to it was for sale, so I talked to the owner, and we made a deal. Well, it was actually a real estate guy that I knew. We made a deal on the house, and I made an offer, and the offer was an amount of money well under 100,000, but it was accepted. But the only thing that had to happen, and I got the place looked at, it was just a house, so there was quite a little had to be done because we had to pave some of the backyard to park for parking, and we had to remodel the inside of the house, so we got it so where you could have offices, and so there was quite a little work that had to be done on it, but we got it for a good price. So, but in the process, there was a block of homes that were all connected to that, and the law for the city of Janesville was that every single homeowner on the block had to agree to be to allow me to be rezoned, because I had to be rezoned because I was going to run a business out of a house. You know how that is. You gotta have the right kind of zoning. So, I went ahead and made a down payment. The payment was accepted. We set up a closing date. I got carpenters in to take a look at the inside and get how we were going to remodel it on the inside, and worked on the outside, got it all lined up, and we were motoring along just beautifully. And then one day, the real estate guy walked into the office when we were downtown yet at 17 South River, and he walks in and he says, "I got bad news for you." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "There's one person on the block that will not allow for that property to be rezoned for what you need it to be rezoned for." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He says, "Well, if he won't do it, you can't be there." And so he said, "You're going to have to." I hadn't started anything, because you don't want to start anything until you're absolutely sure. And so I hadn't started anything, but so he said, "Well," he says, "there's nothing we can do." He said, "I'll just have to look for another property." So I remember walking into Don's office, Don Chapin, and I said, "Well, Don," I said, "the Lord's got a better property for us." And he says, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "This one just fell through. Can't get it." Because he was planning on moving with me, and we were going to set up together, because we did for several years. We were together. And I said, "But, the Lord's got a better one. He just hasn't shown me where it is yet." And he kind of smiled, and I don't think he was quite as excited about trusting the Lord as I was, because I'd seen God work before. So anyway, I said to the real estate agent, I said, "Well, the Lord's going to provide something different. This is not going to be it." And he said, "Well, I'm really sorry." And I said, "No, don't be sorry." I said, because I've been praying that if this was the right thing, that everything would work. And if it wasn't, it wouldn't. So I said, "I'm just assuming that this is God's will, you know. And of course, I testified whenever I got a chance, you know. So anyway, went along. Oh man, must have gone along for 4, 5, 6 weeks. Nothing, you know, nothing else we looked at really tripped our trigger. And then one day he walks into the office, and he says, "Well, I got another property for you." And he said, "This guy wants to go out of town quietly, so he doesn't want to advertise. He wants to just put it up for sale quietly, and then I'm just moving around amongst some people that might be interested in having an office building." And I said, "Well, where is it?" He said, "Well, it's right on Milwaukee Street." And I thought, "Oh, brother." And I said, "Well, can I put up a sign?" He says, "Well, there's a sign already up." So he said, "You can put up a sign." And I thought, man, that's free advertising, you know, if you're there. It's nice to be able to advertise. And I said, "How much is he asking for the property?" And he said, he told me the price, and it was just $10,000 short of double what I had offered and had an agreement on. But he said, "This one's all set up with offices. It's already, you know, was it an osteopath? It was not a chiropractor, but it was something like that. And maybe he was a chiropractor. I guess he was, come to think about it. Well, anyway, he says it's all set up with offices. He said you might have to tweak them a little, you know, do something different. And so he said, there'll be a lot less expense. And I said, okay. And I said, well, what should I do? And he said, well, write an offer. And I said, okay. I said, here's the offer. I said, write him an offer for the exact same amount that we were going to pay for the other one. There's more room here. It's a better location. But write the offer for exactly the same amount. He says, Bob, you're wasting your time. And you're wasting my time. I knew this guy pretty well. His name was Jack. And I said, well, maybe. But I said, I just want to do that. I said, I'll write the offer. And he says, well, I'm embarrassed to take this offer to him. And I said, well, if you don't want to, you can just tell me, but I'm not going to offer any more. Well, okay. So we wrote the offer. He left my office about 9:30 in the morning. 11:30 he walks back into the office, and he had a signed acceptance. And this, I was offering just $10,000 short of half what I had paid on the other building. He said, I couldn't believe it. He said, I took this offer and put it in front of him, and he asked who it was, and he said, can we get a land contract? And that's kind of what I wanted. And because he says, I want a stream of income, you know, so I'd like a land contract. I said, okay. So I signed the offer. I accepted the offer, and that's how we wound up on Milwaukee Street. And that is the intervention of God. Just, you just have to be patient and trust. And you know, and I've seen that over and over and over again in my life, you know.
So that's the place by the church there?
There's a place right by the church where I was for several years, you know.
So what were the years that you were there?
I was there from 1978. Oh my goodness, it must have been through the 80s. Probably to about 88 or 89. So it was probably about 12, 14 years. And then we decided to move down to the Parker Building downtown, and because there was really more room there than we needed, and so I decided to just sell it, and then I sold it to the people who own it now. So it really worked out good, you know. Now I had to put some money in it, but when I got all done, I didn't put as much into it as I would have in the other building. And it really was a far better location than being way off of Milwaukee Street back on one of the side streets, because I had a much better location with traffic going by every day, because Milwaukee Street, busy street. So, and it's always nice. I always said to Don Chapin, I said, you know, when we moved in out there, I said, you know, we look like more than we are. We appear to be a lot more than we are, you know.
So what did the sign say at the road?
Well, it just said Mansur Chapin Agency. And so we put that sign up, and it was up there for years. You know, I don't have a picture of it, but a lot of people would remember it, you know. So but that's where we were for years, and that's how we got there. So another thing I wanted to share with you, it was kind of an interesting thing that happened. Did I share with you about giving the conference superintendent my car?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, I had a 1972 Chevrolet Caprice, and I bought it for my business, and it was a two-door, and I got along with it. It was a sharp car. It was blue, had a blue bottom and a white velour top. It was really sharp, you know. Looked nice, sporty, you know, Caprice, Chevy, really sporty. And I bought that. I'd seen it up in Madison, and I bought it, and from a dealer up there. But all the time I had that car, it just bothered me, because if anybody had to ride in the back, it was really hard getting in the back. You had to pull the seat ahead, and hard for people to get in the back in a two-door, you know. And the doors were so darn big that I had to push them out. And they were really heavy doors, you know, on those cars, because there was just a lot of door on the side of the car, you know. Yeah. And so I didn't really care all that much for it, so I was looking for a four-door. And so I was just kind of hunting around for a four-door, but I hadn't really made up, you know, I hadn't really found one. But then finally I did. Up in Madison, I found a four-door, a 1974 Chevy. This was a 72 Caprice, and I found a 1974 Caprice. It was just had a few miles on it. It was a nice car, and it was exactly the same color, blue, dark blue bottom, and the white top. I thought, oh, okay. Well, I thought I'll just look into that, but I didn't want to trade the car in, because it didn't offer me that much. You know, I had quite a few miles on it. Not a lot, but you know, I had quite a few, maybe 50, 60,000. Well, anyway, I was on the stationing committee for the church. They called it the stationing committee at that time, because you stationed pastors at various places. There were 3 of us on the board. Well, there was an occasion where the superintendent and I had to go to Chicago to a meeting. He had an Oldsmobile. It was Phil Ward. He had an Oldsmobile, and boy, he had a ton of miles on it, because he ran all over everywhere. You know, he was running all over through the conference. Conference wasn't as big then as it is now, but he was running all over. Well, anyway, we were on our way to Chicago. Going down, we were going to go to O'Hare Field. The bishop was flying in from wherever he was, and he was meeting with us down there. And then there was another member of the board that was going to meet us. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, on the way down, he said, "Boy, I got to get a different car." He says, "This car is just on its last legs." He says, "I just been sticking money in, and I got to get a different car." And so I didn't pay much attention. I said, "Well, okay, that's, you know, those things happen. Cars wear out. You have to get another one." So we went on to our meeting, and it was quite a long meeting, and we got out kind of late. Got home about 2 o'clock in the morning. We were there pretty midnight, and then we had to drive home from O'Hare. It was pretty late in the morning before we got home. Well, I went to bed. I'd been to bed about maybe an hour and a half, and I woke up, and it was just as clear as could be. The Lord was saying to me, "I want you to give your 1972 Caprice to the superintendent. I want you to give it to him." Now the car was worth about $3,000. It wasn't real expensive, but it was worth quite a little. And $3,000, when you don't have $3,000, is quite a little.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think much of it. I thought, well, I don't think I want to do that, but it just kept coming at me. I want you to give your car to the superintendent. And I couldn't get back to sleep, and I was tired, and I had to get up and take care of things, because I had livestock. I didn't have cows then, but I had livestock. And boy, oh boy, couldn't make it. And I laid there for probably an hour and a half, maybe close to 2 hours, just arguing. No, I'm not going to do that. No. Finally, I knew I wasn't going to get any sleep, so I said, okay, I'll give my car to the superintendent. And I woke up in the morning about 8:30, because I got a little sleep. As soon as I agreed, went right to sleep. Yeah. So I got up in the morning, and first thing I did is go down and call the superintendent, because I knew that if I didn't do that, I wouldn't carry through that. I wouldn't follow through if I didn't tell him right away, because I knew that I could talk the devil, or the devil could talk me into hanging on to the car. So I went down and I called the superintendent, and I said to him, you told me last night you needed a different car. I said, I'll tell you this morning, you got one. All you got to do is come up here. You can get up here today, and I'll sign the title and hand it to you, and you got the car. It's yours. And he started to thank me, and I'll never forget. I said, no, Phil, I said, don't thank me. I said, the next time you're before the Lord, thank him. Because I said, last night, I argued with him for 2 hours not to give you that car. And he finally, I couldn't get any sleep if I didn't do it, so I finally did it, and then I went to sleep. So I said, don't thank me, because I said, if I had my way right now, you wouldn't get the car. So I said, that's why I called you early this morning, because I don't trust myself. And, sometimes that's the way you have to do things. That's the way you have to deal with them. And, he just told me to give him the car. Well, I don't know if that cost me anything, but, I certainly, here I am. I certainly survived all these years without that money from that car.
What did Grandma think about that?
Well, she was a little surprised, but she wasn't really too surprised, because she'd kind of gotten used to me, because I just did funny things sometimes, she thought. She thought my giving habits, because I was a great believer in tithing and way past tithing. And even to this day, I'm a great believer in tithing. You don't give anything to the Lord until after you've tithed. And you give an offering after you've tithed, but you don't give anything until you have. And I still am a great believer, and I tell you can't outgive God. That's just proved over and over and over and over again. I've given more money than you would think would be mathematically possible, and here I am worth more today, the most I've ever been worth. So, theoretically, you have, the other over here is still there, and it's nobody's business what it is, but, it's just there, and God is just blessed, that's all. And, he promises a blessing if you obey him, he promises a blessing, but sometimes it's a little hard to obey him,
Yeah, in the moment, it's hard.
It's in the moment, it's hard,
Mm-hmm.
And you got to make up your mind, and you fight with yourself a little bit. I can't do this, this isn't going to work, but it does work, And there were times, I know, speaking of giving, that Grandma thought, my determination to give when there was a list of things probably that she wanted and needed, and I would still put the church first always, put the Lord first always. I think there were times when she kind of thought that was kind of bordering on insanity, because I was so dogmatic in giving. But I've never regretted it ever through the years. I've never once regretted it, and we've given a lot of money to the work of the Lord. But all belongs to Him anyway, so it isn't mine to give. It's just right today we set up an arrangement in our estate where I turned everything over into a trust, and ultimately the trust will be paying for ministry for maybe young men going into ministry or young women and people going to the mission field. It'll be used for that. So I'm just managing it, and then for a number of years after I'm gone, why the family will receive the income, but from then on it goes in. It'll be in ministry for till Jesus comes back, or the country gets taken over and all the money gets confiscated. I don't know. That might happen. I hope it doesn't, but that's how that goes.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that story before, so I know we didn't get it on here yet.
That what?
The car story.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think I told you the story. I think you got it on there about the sweet corn crop. I think that one you've heard, haven't you?
What was that?
About when I committed the sweet corn crop in Milton to pay off the parsonage on the south. Is that on here?
It doesn't sound familiar to me. No.
Oh, it doesn't.
No.
Oh dear. Well, here comes another one. We had a farm over by Milton that we bought from my grandfather. My grandfather's estate. It was my step grandmother owned it, and I bought it from her. And we used to raise sweet corn up there because I didn't have to. If I raised sweet corn, I didn't have to run a lot of equipment over to Milton. It was right on the edge of town, right on the edge by Highway 59 in Milton. It was called the Holiday Farm. My grandfather ran a dairy from there, and then when he died, my dad kind of took it over and ran it for several years, and then when he died, I took it over and ran it. Well, then I bought it, but I bought it from the Holiday family. His wife, which would be my mother's stepmother, owned part of it. They got part of it, and then all the rest of the family got part. So I just bought it. Well, anyway, we raised sweet corn up there because sweet corn was an easy crop because you didn't have to harvest it in the fall. I didn't have to take any equipment up there and harvest anything. So I used to raise sweet corn there because the canning company would come in, take the sweet corn, and I didn't have to bother with it. It would be harvested. Well, one year, and I don't remember what year it was, that year I don't remember, but we had decided that we wanted to put an addition on the church. And in order to borrow the money to put that addition on the church, we had to pay off the parsonage because we had a debt on the parsonage, and we wanted to mortgage the parsonage and the church to put the addition on the church. Well, the mortgage was already on the parsonage, so we couldn't do that, and I don't remember how many thousand it was, a few thousand. So we had to get this debt cleared on the parsonage before we could mortgage the parsonage and the church to build on. So I don't know when it was, but I was praying one day that the Lord would somehow supply the money that we needed to pay that debt off. It was several $1,000s. And all of a sudden into my mind came came the statement, I want you to take out your expenses, and then whatever you make on that crop of sweet corn, it was about there was 100 and probably 125, 30 acres of sweet corn over at Milton. Quite a chunk, it was quite a chunk of my income. I want you to take that. Now, I'm already tithing, I'm already giving, and the Lord says, I want you to take that proceeds from that crop and use it to pay off that debt on the parsonage. And I didn't know what it would cover or not, but I thought it would come pretty close, and because I knew what it was. So I, again, being human, I don't think I want to do that. Well, the Lord was just relentless. No, that's what you want to do. I want you to do that. I want you to do it. I want you to do it. And I just didn't get anywhere in prayer until I agreed, okay, Lord, I'll take the proceeds of that crop and give it, whatever over and above my expenses are, take out my expenses, I'll just give the whole works what's left, and we'll donate it to pay off that debt. So then I got peace over it, Well, went through the summer. It was an interesting summer because that year you have in farming, to create a crop, you kind of keep heat units. You kind of identify heat units, like for your raising corn, it kind of takes so many heat units to bring a crop in. And so the crops can move faster or slower through the summer in their process of coming to maturity based on heat units. Well, that was a cold summer. It was just cold all summer long, and it got to be fall, and that crop had not proceeded to mature. And I remember Libby's were watching it, because I was raising it for Libby McNeil, which was the canning company here in Janesville, and I was raising it for them on their behalf, and they were kind of interested in getting that crop, Well, it just didn't mature, but finally it got to the end of September. It was the 29th of September, and the field band for Libby's came in and said, today, or maybe tomorrow, he came on the 28th, because it was the 29th of September, I remember, in that year, and I don't remember what year, but it was the 29th of September. He said, we're taking the sweet corn tomorrow. He said, they're calling for frost tomorrow night, he said, and we're going to just take it. He says, it may not be quite as mature as we'd like, but we're going to take it, because he says, I think we'll be okay. So they came in the next morning, and of course they come in with a whole bunch of corn pickers and buggies and trucks and everything, and they can clear that out short order. So they cleared off the whole field, and that night the temperature dropped to 29 degrees. And so there was frost that night. So the frost had held off right till the 29th of September. I remember that just like yesterday. Well, anyway, what had happened, John, was that north of us, east of us, west of us, and south of us, they'd had killing frost prior to that, because it was such a cold summer. And it was even noted, I think my mother even told me that they received the local newspaper, and I think she told me that it was mentioned in there how, for some reason, our area had not had killing frost yet. Well, what I learned from that, here's what I learned. Here's the lesson I got. If I hadn't been willing to give that crop, all the other crops that I had a bunch of other corn in other places that was maturing slowly, just like that. But it finally got mature along with that sweet corn, because if it had gotten frosted early in September, it wouldn't have been very good. It would have been hard to deal with, hard to handle. But it finally, by the end of September, it got mature. So by giving that crop away, I saved all my other crops of corn. And I had hundreds of acres of corn, other corn, just normal field corn on the other farms. But if it had frozen early, I'd have lost that sweet corn crop and all the other crop. So the Lord taught me a lesson. Don't argue with me. Just do as I tell you, because I know more than you do, and I know what's going to happen more than you do. So just don't argue with me. Just do as I tell you. If I tell you to do something, do it, because I know what I'm doing. And so I learned a good lesson on that. And here again, and we paid off the mortgage, and added we got enough out of the corn to pay off the mortgage. I gave it. It was funny. We used to go to noon prayer meeting years ago, probably 40 years ago now, 50 years, close to 50 years ago. At least 50 years ago. We used to stop everything at noon on Wednesdays and go to prayer meeting, and we would have we'd fast the noon meal, and we'd gather up. Members of the family were there. Of course, most of them were in school. Kids were in school at that time. But we'd go to church and pray. Well, I told the pastor the decision I'd made, because I always found, John, it was a good idea to tell somebody else. If you and the Lord make a deal and you think you might back out of that deal, it's always good to tell somebody else you made it. So then you're kind of locked in,
Keeps you honest.
Keeps you honest. And I told the pastor, and he was delighted. So we started praying every Wednesday noon, for that crop to mature. Because, we were all invested in it, because that was going to be how we were going to add on to the church. And we really needed to do that. And so when that all came about, there was a lot of praise going up from our little church for what God had done, And again, there's a block of money that left my possessions 50 years ago, and to this day, I don't know that it really altered my lifestyle or anything in my life at that time, because God He just has other ways of supplying. He just has other ways of coming into your life. Well, I'm going to tell you something. Those things happen to you again and again and again, and there are more, but I don't think of any. Maybe if you ask me questions, that will trigger some. But there are just, I really believe that when God saves us, He says, now I know that you can't taste me or touch me or see me or feel me or see me. You can't. None of your five senses that you're used to will show you who I am, but I can still reveal myself to you in ways that you haven't even thought of. I can still let you know I am who I am. And I never forgot that, because boy, He did. He just revealed Himself in such ways that you just couldn't argue that it was just nothing but the intervention of the Lord. So when people talk to me about there is no God, I say, nah, you're talking to the wrong person. I've got too much evidence that it's the other way. You can believe what you want to believe, because there's people around that just don't believe all that. They just, those things just happen. No, they just don't happen. Some things might happen in your life, but God says enough that I'm going to get involved with is going to happen, because I want to reveal myself to you so that you will never doubt my existence and my ability. That's just Him. That's just the way He does it, just to let us know. So anyway, now you have some questions.
Yeah, let's see. Well, this is a group of questions all having to do with the Gospelaires.
Okay,
So, I think these came from Marcy.
okay.
She said, I'd be curious to hear stories from the days of traveling with the Gospelaires and why the group was started.
Oh, well, we got started in 1974 in on a Sunday afternoon. I had always, when I was in high school, I sang in the choir. I think I told you that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a lot of singing, and of course I was worship leader for the church for 30 years, and so I did a lot of singing. I sang with your grandpa, we sang in an FFA quartet,
Mm-hmm.
and we sang together, and so singing, I just enjoyed singing, and so I don't know how it happened, but one Sunday afternoon, Lamont and I and Brian and Gordon Church and Faye got together on a Sunday afternoon, and just for our own amusement, it was 1974, and I don't remember what time of the year it was, but I remember the year. It was 74. We got together and we just took some of the hymns and sang different parts. Lamont was a bass and I was a lead, and Brian was a tenor, and Gordon was a baritone. So we had the four parts, and Faye could play the piano. She could play anything, and so we started just messing around. It was just there was no thought of Gospelaires or anything else. It was just we just got together, and it just sounded so good. We just our voices sounded good together, and so we just decided that we would start on a regular basis coming together for our own amusement and amazement, just singing, and so we did. And as it went along, it was Larry Addy. It wasn't Brian to start with. It was Larry Addy, and I think maybe he instigated it. That was Gene's brother, and I think maybe he instigated it more than anybody else. He pushed for it more than anybody else. He wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great tenor. Larry's a good tenor, and that's it's when you're doing quartet, the high voice for tenor and the low voice for bass are very important parts, to make a full-bodied quartet. Well, we got together, and I remember it was Larry. Yeah, it was Larry. It wasn't Brian. Brian came later after Larry gave it up. But that's how we got started. And we just started singing together. Well, then we sang a few times at church, and boy, people got excited about it. They thought, whoa, this is pretty good, And we learned a few songs, we learned like He Touched Me, and we learned a few songs. And then as we did it, there came a weekend where they were having a gospel sing, but it wasn't a gospel sing where they brought in big names. It was just local talent, And I don't know how many people were there. There weren't a lot, but there was some. I don't even remember where we were, but we sang, and boy, the people just raved. They just thought, that's really great. We learned some songs, and then we sang 3 or 4 songs, and they said, oh, you should start learning songs and doing this, going around. So in our early days, we would go to nursing homes, and we would go to Cedar Crest, and my mother loved to have us come there because they just loved to have us,
Mm-hmm.
And so we started going to those places, and then we decided that we got to the point where we had enough songs learned to where we thought we'd like to make a recording. Well, then we had to identify who we were. You know, if you make a recording, you got to have a name. So we chose the Gospelaires.
So why'd you choose that name?
I don't know how that name got chosen. I just don't remember how that name got chosen. Maybe somebody just came up with it. But then we found out that we couldn't be called the Gospelaires, because there was another organization, and if somebody else had copyrighted a name, you couldn't use it. You know, it's like the well, any group, you know, they have their name,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's popular or gospel or whatever it is, you know, and like the Blackwood Brothers or anybody like that, you know. And of course, Jean just loved Southern gospel music. So when we started singing, she was in heaven, because she really enjoyed that. You know, your grandma, she just loved gospel music. She loved the Blackwoods. She loved the Cathedral Quartet. That was her favorite. And so anyway, we learned a lot of cathedral songs, and we finally went down to, I forget where it was, in Indiana. It wasn't the Gaither Studios to start with. It was another place. We made our first recording. And then our last two, we made 3 recordings, and our last 2 were made at Gaither Studios. But you know, we then, Larry started booking us in various churches, and we started traveling. We ultimately got a bus, and because, you know, a quartet was supposed to have a bus.
Yeah.
That was the worst mistake we ever made. But it was, you know, everybody had to have a bus. If you were anybody, you got to be somebody with a bus.
Yeah, you're not a band unless you have a bus.
Yeah, you're not for real unless you have a bus. Yeah, that was a mistake. But anyway, we used to travel with our station wagon and a trailer. Had a trailer that said Gospelaires of, but we had to name ourselves Gospelaires of Wisconsin. That was our real name, Gospelaires of Wisconsin. But we just dropped that most of the time.
So that's how you got around the copyright?
Yeah, that's how we got around the copyright, because there was no other Gospelaires of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
So there was another Gospelaires, but I don't know where they were, off somewhere, maybe down south, I don't know. But when you check out the copyright name, and we got our, we incorporated and became a nonprofit organization, and we filed under a 501c3 ruling of the Internal Revenue Code, and became an entity. So that's how we got started.
Okay, the next question is, any fun stories from being on the road with the group?
Oh yeah. There's some fun stories, some interesting. One of them has to do with our bus. You know, we were up at Richland Center singing. I don't remember what the occasion was, but we would go up in that area of the country a lot, because there were quite a few Mennonites up in there, and Amish. So they like to come and hear us sing. So gospel concerts were very, and in Lamont and Judy Klingeman's old church up at, I think it was Gillingham, or up at Burr, we sang a lot up there. And but we would run this bus, you know, we pulled the bus. And to start with, we pulled the trailer behind the bus. We put the trailer on behind the bus we had all the equipment in the trailer, so we just pull the trailer. But then we got to where we just put all the equipment underneath in the luggage racks, because they had big luggage racks. It was a Greyhound bus. Went to, I had a client of mine that ran a bus service out of Elkhorn, and he went with me down to Little Rock, Arkansas to get this bus. And we drove it, he and I drove it back, and we used to keep it out at the farm. And but one night, I don't know for what reason, because it wasn't my responsibility. We were each delegated certain things that we were to take care of, you know. I mean, for example, Le Mans, we made recordings. Le Mans took care of the recordings, the 8-tracks, the tapes, and all that stuff, and he would take care of that in a concert, you know. And Larry took care of the bookings. He booked us out. And Gordon, I don't remember what Gordon's responsibility was. He had some responsibility too of helping certain areas. Oh, I know what it was. It was he would make all of the 8-tracks, or he'd make all the music, create all the music, and look after the music and the microphones and all that kind of stuff. That was Gordon's job, and my job was kind of take care of the bus. Well, the bus, if for some reason, and I don't know why, we were up in Richland Center, we were coming back, and we got to Madison. It was probably, after we got done singing up there, we got back to Madison. It's probably about, 10:30 in the evening. We ran out of fuel. And I don't know why, because there was a reason that we ran out. It wasn't because we forgot to put it in. It was something went wrong, and it was somehow the fuel was getting away from us. Mm-hmm. So we ran out down in Madison, and it was cold, and we had to go clear on the other side of Madison. We ran out on the north, coming into Highway 14. I remember I think it was down around Middleton. No, it was further out than that. Cross Plains. I think it was Cross Plains that we ran out of fuel on that bus. And there were no stations open. And we had to have diesel fuel, and there were no stations open, and we didn't know how to. Sometimes with a diesel engine, you have a hard time starting a diesel engine after you've run out of fuel. You just don't want to run out of fuel, I learned, with a diesel engine. Because it's hard to get them primed and started after that. Mm-hmm. But we got it. We finally got it, but nobody had any money. I was the only one that had money, and we had some from our offering, so we could use that. But we had to go clear to the other side, and I remember Lamont called Judy. She says, "Just take care of it." I called Jean, and she says, "Yeah, you look after it yourself." There was no. They were home, you know. We were by ourselves. Just the quartet was traveling, and Lamont said, "Oh, Judy will bring us some fuel." Judy says, "You find it wherever you can get it." You know? I don't remember what the deal was, but it was. I may be not quite right on that, but I think she wasn't with us that time, and she didn't want to bring. So I don't know how we wound up, but we wound up getting to the other side of Madison to a station that was open all night or late, and got some fuel and got back. Somehow got that critter going again, and we all kind of agreed that traveling in a bus like that wasn't quite as exciting as we thought. Yeah. You know. And I don't remember any other particular stories. We always teased Faye. She was blind, and she could just play anything on the piano. Boy, she was just great. She could hear a song she'd never heard before, and second time through, she could put a full keyboard to it. She just had that talent, you know. We always teased her because she had a white cane, you know, with one of these red strips on the bottom, and we always said, you know, you can drive the bus, and all you got to do is just keep that cane out in front of you so you know where the road is. Yeah, we had a great time. I really enjoyed that. And
were there anything that you did the same every show? Did you open up the same or close with the same song every time or anything
No,
like that?
well, we did where we hadn't been before. But, you know, we were invited back a number of times to the same church. We went down into Illinois. We went to Florida. You know, we didn't go to Florida. We went to Florida we took John Grover's, no, it wasn't John Grover's. It was another guy that was one of my clients. He had a big Winnebago. Wasn't John's. We used John's once, but this one was a big Winnebago. We took it to Florida, and we sang down there. We sang at the campground down there, and we sang at the Wesleyan Church. They had us down for a series of meetings down there to sing, to be the musical part of their meetings, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went to Florida, and so it was, we sang down at the Free Methodist Church in St. Petersburg, and so we got around.
Is that the furthest you traveled?
I think that's the furthest, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the furthest we ever went. We would go over into Minnesota. Well, I think we got into Minnesota. We traveled into Illinois a lot. Didn't go to Michigan. We went down into near Indiana. Oh, we went over to Indiana. I remember that. We went over to in Ohio. We went to Ohio once. That was quite a ways away. We went over where Lamont's folks, Delbert and Charlotte, were custodians over at a university over there, and I can't remember the name of the university. But we would go over there and sing. That was about as far away as we got, you know. And but we traveled a lot. We traveled all over.
So what were the total years that you did that?
Oh, good grief. I think it was 74, 84, 94. I think it was probably close to 25 years.
Wow. So how many shows did you do per year? Did it kind of stay the same year to year?
Well, yeah, we would do, we most of the time went Sunday nights. We tried to be in our home church on Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
And we went on Sunday nights because that's when we got booked into the church, and that drew people from other churches that weren't kind of violating their principle. We went some Sunday mornings, but we tried to avoid that because we felt like we ought to be in our home churches on Sunday mornings, and so we would go on Sunday nights, and it was for several years. It was pretty. We'd probably go 3 times a month, you know, 2-3 times a month. We wouldn't miss many.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we traveled quite extensively.
Were there any shows where everything went wrong? That's one of Marcy's questions too. Any terrible shows?
No. There were I remember going to a little church up north in the summer, and it was just terribly hot. And of course we wore jackets and ties. And we got into this church, and I bet it was 95 degrees in that little church. And of course, then in comes the people, and they just jammed that church. I think it was probably 100 degrees in there, and we got up to sing. And I can remember the water just pouring off me. I always did perspire when I was younger, and they always got a laugh out of me because I would be perspiring up there and wiping and we carried fans with us, but man, I tell you, when it's 95 or 100 degrees, a fan don't do much. But there was no air conditioning. But boy, I remember that particular night, and the biggest mistake we made is we stopped on the way into town to get something to eat. On the way, I forget what the name of this town was. Maybe it was Sparta. No, not Sparta. Like Soldiers Grove or somewhere up in there. It was a little church out in the country. That's all I remember. It was a small church. But we stopped anyway, and we got a cup of coffee, and I drank that coffee. Hot coffee on a hot night, that just enhances your ability to perspire. I remember that night I came home and pulled my tie off, and my collar on my white shirt was absolutely red because I had perspired through the neck, and the shirt was just soaking wet, when we got done. I was never so hot, and it was just hard to sing,
Yeah.
But we just there were times when we'd make mistakes on a song. We'd just have to stop and start over, or there were times when I couldn't remember the words, and I was a lead, so I always was held responsible to be able to remember the words. Well, there were times when I would just make up words, and the guys would look at me like, "What are you doing?" Because I couldn't remember the words, but I just make up something, and we'd get to the end of it. And I did that more than once, and I always remember John Grover got to where he was singing with us, and he'd say, "That's interesting, Bob, the way you rewrite these songs at times." I couldn't remember the words, sometimes your mind just goes blank.
So you didn't have the words with you at all? You just had
Well,
them
no,
memorized?
you had them memorized.
Yeah.
We memorized all our songs,
Mm-hmm.
We didn't use, in the early going, we used words because we didn't know any better, but it wasn't long before we got rid of that because, you wanted to have the songs memorized because, Faye was she had a great musical talent, and she said, you can't really sing with emphasis until you've memorized the words, because you got to understand what you're saying and then apply the feeling to what you're saying. And if you're hunting for the words, that just doesn't come.
Yeah.
And so she really did us a lot of good. She really helped us. She was a tough teacher. She'd make us sing on key, and she just stopped because she could hear everything. And she just had a tremendous ear. She played by ear, of course. She's blind, so she didn't use any keys. But
So how long was a typical show? How many songs did you do in a show?
we used to do about 12.
12 songs?
Yeah, we would do about 8 in the first segment, then have about a 15-minute break, and then do 4 in the last segment. That's just about what we would do. Our programs were usually about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, because that would be a normal service, And then, of course, we'd always have maybe people really wanted to hear us sing another one, we'd sing another one after that,
Mm-hmm.
And so we did that. It was a lot of fun. We had a great time, and we had a lot of laughs, and enjoyed it. So
Well, let me see.
you must be just about.
Yeah, I can never tell. I think this will be a quick story.
Okay.
I don't know. This came from my dad.
Okay.
He wanted to hear the story about the tractor sinking into the mud and just seeing the muffler sticking out of the mud. He was saying that there was a tractor out in the mud, and it was made to look like it had sunk. The tractor itself had sunk down into the ground.
Yeah, and that happened more than once.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, so I don't remember. We had a ravine. Two ravines on one of the farms that we worked, where it was actually the home farm, the Mansur home farm. We had a ravine, and I don't remember what the occasion was, but we were going down through there with a big tractor, and that tractor sunk. I don't remember how far down into the mud it went, but it was really bad. We had to get our two tractors and Venables. I think this is the time he might be referring to.
Well, I didn't want to give the punchline away, but he's talking about when someone made it look like it sunk. He said that a tractor was left in mud, and some neighbors got together, took the muffler off, got the tractor out and stuck the muffler in the mud
To make it look that way?
to make it look like that. Yeah.
Oh,
Did that happen?
well, it could have on the occasion that I'm talking about,
Oh, okay.
because we did have neighbors that got us pulled out, but I don't remember. See, that would be something your dad would be involved in, and I don't remember that occasion of. But I remember one time we went into a ravine, and I don't remember whether we had one of the straight tractors or a 4-wheel drive then. I think it was one of the straight tractors with just the normal wheels in front, and we sunk down. We went down so far, and you just couldn't get out. We were digging trenches probably 2.5 feet deep, trying to get out. And that may very well be the time that they pulled it out and left the mufflers sitting there, and then maybe taking pictures of it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember. I'd have to ask him about that, because I think he might have been involved in some that I wasn't, but we had springs on our farm at home, on the home farm, and boy, I tell you, if you didn't get through them springs in the spring, planting, sometimes we'd plant in road gear. I mean, we'd go down flying through there and just get whatever you could in the ground, because if you didn't get through there, it was just like quicksand trying to drive on it.
So it was underground springs that
Yep,
were kind of coming
yep,
up.
and it would just keep the ground wet, and you just sink right down. And you didn't see it coming, because the ground would be a little bit dry on top, and you'd fly right into it, and you just whoop, go down like you'd slammed on the brakes. Just go right down into it. And we had to be pulled out of there several times, and that may be one of those times.